All right. Hopefully you guys watched the first two parts and you guys are back with me. This is part 3. And what I want to do in this part is I kind of want to talk about my likes and dislikes after using all of these scopes for each individual scope, so you can see if maybe some of those things that I like or dislike are deal breakers for you when trying to decide which way to go. All right, and we'll just run it down the line. Okay, 5 to 25 Leupold. And this largely applies to the 7 to 35 for the Mark 5s. Okay, so my number one complaint is going to be the windage setup. I have harped on about this for so fucking long. This line should not run parallel to the scope body, the windage line indicator. It should stick out. I mean, I'll give you a great fucking example. The Kahles. Look at that. You see how that triangle point is right there? It's super easy to see where you're at, like on the windage. Okay? Even if you want to talk about the opposite side. Okay? Boom. Look at this. Because normally this is a capped windage on the Leupold, but look how Schmidt Bender did it. They put a ring there, still at the 45 offset, and bam, you got a nice, clear, easy triangle with a fine point that connects right to that. Okay? So I don't like that setup because, number one, I think their line here is just way too thick. Like, really, look at this. Like, what is that? What number did I just dial there? Is that, like, I don't know if it's showing up well on camera, but is that 0.6 or is that 0.7? Like, what is that? And so I just think that line is just too thick, especially for wind dialers. Now, when they made this scope, I'm going to take a guess that they assumed that most people would just hold all of their windage, so they didn't put a whole ton of thought in it. They said, fuck it, let's just cap it and call it a day. They did have the foresight to think that some people would, because they put a 45 mark instead of like traditionally like down here where most scopes have it. So they put it up here, which is okay, that's fine. I don't have a huge problem with that as much as I do like this line. It runs parallel. So essentially, when you're looking behind the scope, you can actually induce a little bit of parallax on your windage reading. It's kind of funny because you'll like look at it, and like depending on which angle you're looking at it from, it'll look like a different fucking like number, and you're like, fuck, is that really? And because it doesn't like lock at 0 or have some sort of like hard detent at 0, you're like, fuck, am I really at 0, or do I have like a 10th dialed in there? So you got to be super careful. I oftentimes with this scope find myself going back to 0 and then recounting clicks. Like if I had wind dialed for a previous stage and then I want to dial more for the next one, I'll go back to 0 and then count however many I need. So not a fan of that. My other huge complaint with the Mark 5 is the field of view, man. And for reference, the easiest way that I'm going to be able to reference a lot of this for you guys is to tell you how many mils on each side there are, so you can go look at your rifle scope and then compare. So this one, when I have it at 20 power, so I'm going to put all the scopes as close to 20 power or right at 20 power if they're marked that way. This has exactly 8.5 mils on each side. 8.5 mils on each side. And that is the lowest field of view at 20 power. And being that I shoot a lot at 20 power now, you just feel fucking crammed. I mean, you know, motherfuckers out here want to talk about, it's got a forgiving eye box. Dick, you didn't even put them on a repeatable cheek weld. You put them on a bunch of random tripods. Like, don't do that shit. The eye box is decent. It's not, I mean, the only one that it's probably better than is this fucking Steiner on the table, okay? The eye box is decent, but it's also priced lower than the rest of these, so it gets a pass on that. But the field of view is really just, I mean, fuck, dude. Every time I look through this thing, it's like, and with a trigger cam, it just makes it that much worse. So that's for future Mark 5s or Mark 10s or whatever the next one is, I really hope they open up that field of view, especially because, you know, you've got other companies, especially like the Kahles now, that's sort of advertising that wide field of view, right? And like the Gen 3 Razor, the tangents already had really wide field of views as it is. My other complaint that has been a long time complaint, I don't think they'll ever fix it, and truthfully, for 99% of you guys, is not a big deal at all, is the lack of illumination in the PR2 reticle. And even for me, like 95% of the time, that's not an issue. I don't shoot a ton of night matches, but I have. But on the flip side, I also know that I'm in a position where if I do shoot a night match, I can take something with an illuminated reticle. For those of you that only have one rifle scope, if you decide to go to shoot a night match, or you know you only want to run Mark 5s to be consistent, that's fine. Just know the PR2, you're either going to have to try to shoot it without an illuminated reticle, which is kind of crazy, or you're going to have to get a Mark 5 with a different reticle for that particular match. So I wish they would illuminate that fucking thing. I really wish they would. Other than that, I don't have a ton of complaints on this thing. Oh, and the minimum parallax. I wish the parallax would go down to like 25, 20 yards. It doesn't have to go all the way to 10, but something lower than kind of what's 50 but unmarked would be great. But yeah, I mean, I think price-wise, it's a great value for where it sits. And like I said, it's lightweight, so it goes on, you know, both a hunting rig and a PRS rig, centerfire, of course. I don't even care that it's a 35 mil tube. That's not the end of the world, really. Things that I like about this scope. I do like quite a bit, man. So first off, the PR2 is one of my favorite reticles. I love how clean it is. I actually like the 0.25 increments that it goes in, and the 0.25 base for the reticle. A lot of people don't, or they think that it'll take them a while to get used to it. I got used to it pretty quick, especially because it's just such an intuitive reticle. Like your 0.2 and your 0.25 and your 0.75 are pointing down, and your 0.5 is sticking up. I think that's super intuitive, super great. The line spacing is great. You only get 2 mils above center, which is awesome. The PR3 is also really, really awesome, but unfortunately only available in the Mark IV. I'd like to see the PR3 come to this Mark V. I think that would also be a super hit because, again, I'm gravitating towards non-tree reticles because there's just not a ton of holdover stages anymore, and I'd really like to free up that bottom space. I do like the turret setup. I like the spacing, and you know, it's 10.5 mils per turn. I'm hardly ever over 10 mils, so that doesn't super make a huge difference, but it is nice. I also like how you can zero this thing, so something a little bit different. You can actually remove the cap, and then there's the column for the erector actually sticks up, and it's got like a point where you can just insert like a flathead or a coin of some sort, and you can just freely turn that, so you can just zero with that. That way you don't have to like worry about like, oh fuck, I can only go down 0.5 or like dial up, then switch the turret and all that shit. Just take the turret off and just count. So there's no like numbers indicated on that, but you can count it. So, you know, if you take a shot at 100 and you see, oh, I'm, you know, 1.5 mils high, then just count, okay, 15 clicks essentially down, and boom. And then just put it right back at 0 and tighten the set screws and you're done. So I think that's super cool. And I mean, I am a fan of the tan. It's pretty good. But yeah, so those are my likes and dislikes. Oh, I also like the fact that, you know, a sunshade is included. Usable scope caps. They're not great, but they're usable scope caps. I don't really run scope caps too much on any of my scopes, but they're included as well. And then the little throw lever nub is included. Again, I run the bone spur because you can actually see through it. So shout out to Flatline Ops for that. You know, sort of innovation there. But yeah, you know, so a good amount of likes versus my dislikes. But yeah, some of those dislikes are just, I think for me, the biggest one I would like to see if I had to choose one dislike for them to work on is the field of view, man. Or the windage. I don't know. Those two things are right up there, 1A and 1B. in terms of like redoing that. But yeah, so that's the Mark 5. All right, Kahles DLR. This scope recently has been making a lot of waves. It is pretty much the newest scope of the table, and it's been advertising a super wide field of view, and it is true. The field of view on this thing is absolutely fucking massive. So for reference, it's at 20 power. So remember, this was 8.5 mils on each side, basically. This, you're at 12.2 mils on each side. Now, you only have full mil marks after the 10, but if I sort of look at something that's the same distance, it's basically 12.1 or 12.2 mils on each side. That is crazy. That's disgusting. That's like almost 4 mils on each side more than this. Huh? So obviously love the field of view. When I was shooting this, I shot it almost exclusively at like, well, it's unmarked, but like somewhere in there. So I don't know, maybe like 25-ish power. And it was fantastic. I had no trouble finding targets or anything like that. The field of view was great. Yeah. Wow. Super impressed with the field of view, man. Not sure exactly how they did it, but obviously the eyepiece is massive. So I'm going to take a wild guess that that has something to do with it. 36 mil tube. I already had some rings, obviously, from my ZCOs. So I threw the rings on here. I don't really mind the 36 mil tube. I love the 10 mil per turn, and the turrets are good. They have good feel, pretty easy to rotate, so love that. Parallax, I also do like the parallax because it parallaxes down to 20. So super forgiving range there, super forgiving band, I should say. The parallax was a little bit pickier than I'd like, but again, if you want me to get super in-depth on this scope, go watch my individual review of this scope. I love, 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 love left side windage. Honestly, man, that's like, if I was going to run a Kahles permanently, it would be because of the left side windage. Because to me, especially now in my shooting career, I am dialing a lot more wind than I ever have, and this just makes it super easy to check and double check and continue to dial mid-stage for wind. So love that. I also really like the fact that under the illumination cap, they include like a little Allen key that's just kind of held in there with a magnet so that you can zero out your turrets without needing to pull your tools out. So love that. What I don't like about this scope, okay, I love the field of view. Personally, I don't like how big this ocular is because, again, doesn't work with a trigger cam, and I'm all about the trigger cam. It's a great, great tool. I shoot almost every match with a trigger cam on so that, number one, I can make content for you guys, and number two, I can review the footage and see where I fucked up or where I didn't. And it's just good to always look back and really assess, was I really holding on the right spot? Did I miss, some sort of dust or something if I couldn't see anything on a miss? All that kind of stuff, all right? I don't like the 50 millimeter objective. Why the fuck they put a 50 mil on this thing, I have no idea. Like, it's too heavy to be a hunting scope, in my opinion, like a dedicated hunting scope. I guess maybe for like ARs, but honestly, like, whatever, dude. The only difference between putting this on like a top rail, like an AI or an AR that has like a full length top rail, the only difference is that you can get by with a lower mount. Traditionally with 56 mil objectives, like when I put my my 5-27 on my JP that has a full top rail, that's in a 1.5 inch mount because that's a 56 mil objective. This one maybe you can get by with like a 1.26 or something, but I don't think that type of consideration is valuable enough to not put a 56 mil in this thing. So I don't understand that. It just makes no sense because the other thing is they made this short, so you're trying to cram a lot into a tight space. And especially the front center section here, not sure if you guys can really tell, but look how fucking short this mounting section is. Let me try to take off this dope card holder here. So this is, I mean, look at that. And you have to be careful that you can't mount it too far backwards or you're going to hit the parallax. So you really have a super, super short mounting position there. It's just not great, man. Not great. Plus you have all this in the back. So it's like you kind of need a cantilever mount to like push this forward. So yeah, that's my dislikes. Also the reticle. This is the Skimmer 4 Plus, and not bad. I think if I run this in the future, I'll do the Skimmer Plus, which is the non-tree version, and I think that one is pretty good. Not a huge fan of the way that they scaled the reticle for the magnification range. Again, if you want to hear me go in depth about that, watch the full review of this one. But yeah, just not a fan of the way that they scaled the reticle for this magnification range. And I do think that the reticle could use a couple of tweaks, but like I said, the Skimmer Plus certainly isn't bad. I've never been a fan of the Skimmer 4 or 3 or any of the traditional Skimmer reticles. That's just me. But yeah, so that's my likes and dislikes about the Kahles 3 to 3.5 to 28. Okay, Nightforce 7 to 35. So you guys all know what this is. I'm sure you guys have all seen these at your fucking matches. This thing's like a grandpa. Still super popular in the PRS, but it's definitely old. So, likes and dislikes. I personally, okay, I don't know. I used to just absolutely love the rotating ocular because it was just so easy to just grab and turn for magnification. Now, I don't really find myself zooming in and out during a stage, so I'm kind of whatever about that. And it's also made it a little bit more complicated to run a trigger cam on this particular scope, again, because then the whole image rotates. So it's like a love-hate relationship with me on that particular aspect. But I know most of you guys don't like it, especially because when you have this up here, it'll hit the throw lever on a lot of your actions, which I get. I don't run into that problem, but that's because I run a Curtis and a CDG, or like my AI and stuff. So those are not 90-degree bolt throws. I don't have any actions that have a 90-degree bolt throw that I run consistently. So I don't run into that issue, but I know that a lot of you guys complain about that. Again, something that probably 99% of you guys won't really encounter or care about, and truthfully even myself, but the illumination, I just don't like the push button, because if you need to adjust and then you go too bright, you gotta like basically cycle the whole thing over again. And that really only comes into play, like, I mean, you could take this thing hunting and maybe it comes into play for that, or again at a night match, things like that, but yeah, just something that I'd like to see them improve with some sort of knob or just a different way of doing this, so you don't have to like cycle through. You know, if you want like setting 4, you got to go all the way through like 5, 6, 7, and then repeat and go up. So there's that. I do like that they offer red and green. That's a nice touch, but I don't know. I'm not a night vision, thermal kind of guy, so I mean, it's not. Again, illumination for me is only for really for night matches. So that's that. I actually don't necessarily mind the way that they did the windage, with having the option of capped or uncapped, and then with the beauty ring on it. I just wish that the clicks were a little more positive and not as mushy on the windage. But I assume that, again, when they did this, they probably figured that most people would just zero their scope and then never touch the windage again, which is fair. A lot of people still do that. But yeah, I just would have liked a more positive feel on the windage knob, because the elevation is great. Love that. And that's pretty much it. I guess it's not a huge deal because the diameter of the elevation turret is wide enough. But I wish they'd just go to a 10. Like, what's with the 12? Because if you are in the second revolution, instead of just, like, knowing that the one is 11, right? Because you just add 10 to each, so that's super quick math. You gotta add 12, so it's like, oh, what's 12 plus 1? 13. Okay, cool. But I have seen that fuck up a few people at, you know, like ELR matches and stuff where they're not like super paying attention, and you know, the math gets a little confusing when you're on the clock. I think we've all been there. And yeah, I mean, I like the accessories that the 7-35 comes with. I felt like it's always been a good value in that department. You get an actual sunshade, and obviously with the tan, like I said, it matches, which is a nice touch. You get Tenebrex scope caps. Obviously, these are FDE for the FDE scope. The black ones will come with black, but to get Tenebrex caps included is nice because normally those are a couple $100. And then a little mini throw lever or just the cap that comes in there if you don't want to run anything. So I think value-wise, like, it does come with a good amount. It's nicely packaged, and you get like your little cleaning cloth and that kind of stuff. So that's kind of where I sit with the 7-35. Again, obviously this is the Mil XT reticle, which I do like. I think if I had the option, I would go with the Mil C, but unfortunately the Mil C reticle is not available in the tan color, and I really wanted a tan one, so that's why I went Mil XT, which is still a good reticle, but again, now that I've gravitated towards non-tree, the Mil C would be my choice in tan. Tangent. This is the 5-25. I kind of wish that I would get a Coyote one. I've had this one forever, but maybe I'll like try to get a Coyote one. Or if I ever do get the 7-35, maybe I'll do that. Anyway, things that I like and dislike. Okay, not a ton here because I just think this is a really well done scope. But the turrets are awesome, and this is one of the few scopes where I don't mind 15 mils per turn, but I do wish that they would imagine these turrets with this feel, but in a 10 mil, because again, you're hardly ever over 10 mils in a PRS match. You're not, hardly ever. Like 90% of your scope's life is gonna stay between 2 mils and 7 mils. Like that band right there is gonna be 90% of a PRS scope's lifespan. So that would be amazing with this, especially with the writable turrets and how popular that's getting. And the reason I say that is because the extra spacing just gives you extra space to make the marker, and if you need to write stuff. So sometimes I'll mark like, I don't know, 0.5, let's say, for a target, and then I'll put like target 1, because let's say it's out of order, so that's target 1. Then target 2 is going to be 2.5. I'll write that as target 2, but let's say target 3 is 1.5. I'll write a 3 above that, right? And so it gets a little crammed when you're trying to write real small, but I would just like to see them do a 10 mil version. I think that would be absolutely awesome. Other than that, I don't have a ton of complaints. Oh, magnification ring is way too stiff. It's just way too stiff. You have to run a throw lever on this thing. Trying to turn this without a throw lever is really a fool's errand. I mean, it's not great. Again, I don't spend a ton of time adjusting my magnification on the clock, but and it doesn't loosen up. Like, I've had this thing for years, and yeah, I just would like to see that be a little bit smoother and not as like stiff. Maybe a better sunshade. I don't use sunshades a ton, but the one that comes with it is an ARD. I'd like to see just a regular sunshade, because I think the majority of people don't need an actual ARD for what they're intended for. So I think just a sunshade would be great, because I don't want to have to like pop out the ARD and feel like I'm destroying the one that comes with a very expensive rifle scope. And then, like I said, you can buy a sunshade, but the one that you can buy is like comically long. So it just turns this into like literally a fucking 20 some odd inch scope. And it's just like, what, bro? Like, my scope is as long as my barrel. I don't understand what is happening here. So, yeah, other than that, I really don't have a ton of complaints. I really, one more thing that I would like to see is more reticle options. So they have the Gen 3 XR, which is this one, the Gen 3 XR Fine, which is just basically a smaller center dot, but the same layout. And then they have the JTAC reticle. And then obviously they have the horse options, but those are trash anyway. And the JTAC isn't bad. Personally, I'd like to see a couple tweaks on it, but when I got this, the JTAC was not available. If I do get a new tangent, I would probably lean towards the JTAC reticle, and but I would like to see a couple of more options, I think. But yeah, other than that, man, the tangent's just always been a really, really good fucking scope. It's always been right up there at the top. All right. Okay. The 5 to 45, this one's in an interesting spot, again, because I'm going to get the turret changed to the DT2. So that'd be my first complaint, but it's changeable, which is awesome. So, like, yeah, it's like 500 and change, but I do really like the DT2 Plus setup because it's got a lock on, a lock off, like on a switch, if you guys haven't seen it. Once I get it done, then I'll do a separate video on that if you guys want to see it. And you can turn on and off the MTC, which is the more tactile click at the full mill. So won't bash this turret too much as a dislike because it's easily replaceable. But yeah, I don't like any of these like low profile turrets. I get the intention because when they made these, they made them more for military applications where you can like run a red dot over the top or weapon mounted laser rangefinder over the top, and the turret wouldn't interfere with that as much. But just not great for PRS. It's just not. Okay. On the new 6 to 36, they got rid of it, which is great. I guess I'd like to see an update. I don't know, but this illumination housing I think should go. Now on the 5 to 45, again, not as much of an issue because there's a ton of real estate fore and aft to like mount, whether you have a one piece or separate rings. So not a huge deal, but for like some of the legacy models, it'd be kind of nice to see them adopt the same thing. But I get it. That's like a whole manufacturing change. So probably more expensive than it's worth at this point, right? And I mean, shit, that's pretty much it, man. Like, I actually don't mind this windage setup at all because I'd just run it like this and not really worry about the threads. I don't know how they could do a beauty ring in here. I don't think they really could because then it would take away that marking because the threads are so recessed. But yeah, I mean, given with what they could do currently, I think that's great. And personally, I'd like to see this more compatible with a trigger cam, but honestly, that's more on trigger cam than on Schmidt. So I hope that trigger cam can get one that is more adaptable to scopes with large oculars. And my biggest complaint with the Schmidt is probably just reticles, man. The TR2ID and the GR2ID are not bad. They're just not my personal flavor anymore. At one time, I would have graduated heavily towards the TR2ID, and I would have said it's just about perfect because it's just a simple 2mm tree reticle, and it does look really nice. But again, I don't want trees anymore. I don't, and that the reticles are always a personal preference. So that's why I encourage you guys to go look at the schematics of each reticle, and if you can actually look through them. On paper, the GR2ID looks pretty bad, but I've looked through a number of them, and it's actually not that bad in person. It's still more than what I want personally, but it's actually just not that bad in person. So I encourage you, again, to go out and look at any of these scopes if you can, through any of these reticles, and just see what makes the most sense to your eye, because you don't want to be fighting your reticle. That's something that you interact with every time you shoot, and it just should be intuitive to you. So I would like to see Schmidt come out with a couple of good non-tree options, because they really don't have any good ones for the PRS game anyway. All right. ZCO, the 8 to 40. Man, okay. I don't really have a ton of complaints on this one either. It's a good scope. I think one thing that I would like them to do on the 10 mil per turn specifically is just lower the amount, like the tension. It's not awful, but I'd like to be able to turn this just a smidge faster. You know, with 10 mils per turn, but not the end of the world. And I mean, I don't know if they could. I mean, I guess for all these companies, really, obviously, you know, bar Kahles, but I'd love to see them do a left side windage on this. I'd love to see that from everybody. The other thing I'd like to see ZCO do on the next iteration of scope is, with how smooth this magnification ring is, I don't think I like the texture and sort of the pattern that's on it. I don't think you need this fin, and that way. And again, I know this probably doesn't apply to a ton of you guys, but it would just make it that much easier to run a trigger cam on there, and because this fin is really what bogs it up, because this magnification ring fits under the trigger cam, if you will, until the fin hits. So either shorten this length here, like, because I don't know that you really need that much, but it's not bad either. Or just preferably just remove this whole fucking fin. I don't think you need it, because the grip, like the pattern is so easy to grip that you don't need it at all. And it's smooth enough that you don't need it, in my opinion. And that's, honestly, that's probably pretty much fucking it. I mean, I think now with the 1X reticle, they have a super clean non-tree reticle, and I absolutely love it. It's that and in a vacuum, that and the PR3 are probably like the two reticles that I love the most at this particular point in time. And the Mil C is also pretty up there as far as what I'm looking for. The Skimmer Plus from Kahles is obviously pretty close to that as well, with a couple tweaks. But yeah, dude, I mean, I don't really have a ton of complaints with the ZCO. It's just a good fucking scope, similar to the Tangent, just really, really well done, and not a ton of complaints. Yeah. Okay, the Zeiss S3 6-36. So, likes and dislikes. I mean, I guess it'd be nice if they put numbers on the parallax ring, and I know that the numbers aren't supposed to be exact, but on good scopes, they're usually pretty close. So if I know my target's at 500, I can put it at 500 and it's going to be pretty spot on. Now, it may need some minor tweaking once I get behind the scope, but it's going to be in that little ballpark. But with this, I mean, I guess you could like write on it or like, you know, mark it up somehow. But I just, you know, I know a lot of people have apprehension about doing that to a nice scope. So I would like to see them switch that to numbers, even if they can make it decently accurate. That'd be nice. The, I mean, I don't have a ton of complaints about this one either. I think my biggest complaint about the S3 in general is going to be the reticles, where they literally only have one option for mils, and then they have one option for MOA, and they're not even the same reticle. Like, you know, a lot of these scopes, you can get the same reticle, but in an MOA base or in a mil base, but it's the same layout. And that's not even an option with this. And the reticle that they do have is just, it's crazy because it's not even that, it seems like the lines are too thick, but I think really they're just too dark. But yeah, it's a crowded reticle. Again, this is my personal preference. I prefer non-trees, so it's a little bit crowded there. I also don't super love the inconsistency. If I pointed this out, and I've got a good diagram on the comparison that I did of the Mark V and the 6-36, but I don't love the inconsistency in the way that they marked the half mils. So half and 1.5 are like a fine aiming point, like basically the same as like the actual center dot of the reticle, But then 2.5 and on, there's no more like 0.5 mark. You got a bracket between the two hashes. So I just make it consistent all the way through. I mean, it's rare that you hold that much wind, but you never know. Or for like a crazy mover, like I've had to hold like 2.5 on a mover before. It's kind of fun, but it's pretty far out there. But anyway, I just like it consistent, whether that's a bracket or a fine aiming point, consistent across the reticle. I think that's just sort of a key there. And other than that, I don't have any huge complaints. The set screws on this fucking thing. The set screws to zero out the turrets are a Torx, where most of these are a hex. And I forgot what exactly, but it's like a T6 or a T8. It's not a common size. So why did we have to do that? Why couldn't we just use hex like everybody else? I don't understand. But anywho, so I'd like to see them revise that. That's not the end of the world. And truthfully, they could probably even do that moving forward without too much headache. Other than that, I don't think it's bad at all. Especially for the price point. The 5 to 25s. This one's also tough because it's like, this is a legacy scope and, it's hard. I mean, yeah, I have a lot of complaints about it compared to modern scopes, but this isn't a modern scope in terms of like when it was made and things that people were looking for or didn't know that they wanted and or needed back then. It was just... At the time that this came out, it was just supposed to be the gold standard of rifle scopes, and it was supposed to be the best rifle scope, and it was, widely used across many militaries and law enforcement and things like that, and the civilian side wasn't a huge consideration, and you just kind of got what you got, and if you really needed a top-end or wanted a top-end scope, you got this. So... Obviously, I don't love this setup. They have new 5 to 25s that are great. So, I'm not going to harp on this thing too much. What I will say about Schmidt Bender in general is just, again, reticle choices. They don't have a really good non-tree reticle. Again, personal preference, but I think now a lot of people are actually gravitating towards that as well. So I'd love to see them come out with a really good, like their H2 CMR that was discontinued was a really good starting footprint for what could be a great reticle. That one needed just a couple of tweaks. So if they could bring that one back, that'd be great with a couple of modern touches. But currently as it sits, they don't have a great non-tree reticle. But for those of you that still like the tree, the TR2ID is probably the way you want to go. I'm not sure if that one's available. I have to check in the 5 to 25, but it is available in the 6 to 36, which is probably the way that most people are going to go anyway. If you've got one of these, if you're looking at Schmidt Bender, you're probably looking at the 6 to 36, truth be told. If you have one of these, it's probably because you're an OG or you've had it for a long time, because there aren't too many people buying the 5 to 25s these days, unless you find it used, which the used market for these, it's a really good value right now, just because there's not a lot of interest in them. The M7XI. So this one's obviously not a PRS scope really, but it's just an interesting scope to me. This is obviously for a military contract, so kind of similar with the old days of the 5 to 25. You just kind of get what you get. So I won't have a ton of complaints on it. What I will say is that I would like to see this turret be 10 mils, because at 15, it's just too tight, especially the way that they have it laid out. And so I'd like to see, and especially because these lines are so uniform, like even the 0.5 mil line doesn't really stick up as much as I'd like to see on a scope that's got 15 mils per turn. So I'd like to see a 10 mil version, but I get it. It's not really for us as PRS shooters. Selfishly, I guess I'd like to see a way that the trigger cam could be integrated into this, or somehow at least work with it, but I get it. You just have this massive fucking computer on the back end, so not a ton you can do about that. And then minimum parallax is 50 meters. I'd like to see, you know, a 20, 25 meter minimum, but not the end of the world at 50. And honestly, I think with this scope in particular, I'd like to see more advancement on the ballistic software integration side of things. I'd like to see them continue to improve and support that side of it in terms of their app and the way that you can customize the layout and those different things in here. So, but that's not really like super PRS related. It was just a super interesting scope to me. I do know some people run the regular M7XI, not the IFS version, but yeah, I just I don't have a ton of complaints because it just kind of, it is what it is. Reticle, again, MSR2, not a terrible reticle, not great for PRS, but not bad. They do have in like the T6, they now have, I believe it's the SCR2, which looks to be a pretty good reticle. I'd like to see them put that in this line of scopes, but again, this is a military scope, so they've got a very different audience that they're marketing this towards, and so I just really don't think that they are going to do that, and I don't even think that they give a shit about doing it, which is fine. I get it, but yeah, after that we have the again, not listed on the table, the Gen 3 Razor. Really good scope. I think for me, I would like to see a factory option. So on my Gen 3 Razor, I had them remove, I sent it in so they could remove the locking. So now it just turns like freely, like you don't have to lift up the turret to turn it. So there's no lock and unlock on it at all. It just turns like a regular turret, which I think is awesome. It's not the end of the world to send it back and have them do it because they do it super quick. Mine was turned around in like a week or less, and which is great. But I just, because I feel like a lot of people would choose that option, it'd just be nice to not have to send in a brand new scope like the day that it comes in. Like you buy it and then it's got to go right, you get it and you're excited and you open it and then it's got to go right back in the box and go right back to Vortex to get that done. However, I do think that it is awesome that they offer that service because a lot of companies won't sort of oblige in that way. And the other complaint that I have about the Gen 3 Razor, and I touched on this in my full review of that scope, is the reticles. The 7D isn't bad by any stretch. It's perfectly usable. And then they have the Horus options, but I just don't like a tree. I know it's an overarching theme of all the reticles, but they don't have any options other than the 7D, tree or non-tree. So I'd like to see a couple of more options. Even the 7D, I think, could use a couple of tweaks, not a ton, just a couple, and it'd be really great for those of you that like a tree reticle. But the lack of non-tree reticle in general, I think, is something that's missing in that scope. So I'd like to see that. Other than that, just it's a really well done scope. You know, I know there's a lot of things floating around online about, you know, the reliability and heat shift and things like that. I haven't experienced that myself. And I tread lightly touching on that because of the fact that, like, I can't see the people that have said that they've experienced that. I can't see what you're seeing, and I wasn't there, so I can't truthfully, and it like doesn't make a ton of sense, but I guess it could be a thing. I'd like to know more about it, just because I've never encountered that with any scope, really. And so I just have a lot of questions about that before I make a definitive statement or give an opinion on that. So I'll just kind of leave it there. But in my experience, and the Razors that the Razor 3s that I've had have all been reliable. I don't have 18 of them, but, I only have one, but I've had three, including that T&E one. And they were all great. So, reliability to me is not an issue with those scopes. And same thing with the Razor 2. The Razor 2, obviously, I don't see them making any tweaks to at this point because they have the Razor 3 that they kind of want to push people towards buying. Obviously, there's still a segment that's going to buy the Razor 2 because of the price point, but on a really good sale, you can find the Razor 3 for a hell of a fucking deal that, to me, is close enough to a Razor 2 that I'd buy the Razor 3 because it's just a significantly better scope. And that's kind of it. As far as the Razor 2, I don't want to go up and down and have a whole soliloquy on it because of the fact that that's what the Razor 3 is for, and they really improved pretty much every complaint that I had with the Razor 2 in the Razor 3. So that's good, and I do appreciate Vortex for being a company that listens and is willing to adapt. They've shown that time and time again, and I think that that's missing from a lot of companies. When I touched on it in my Razor 3 review, when the scope first came out, the turrets didn't feel great, and then immediately they were like, hey, anybody that doesn't like their turret feel, send it back and we'll fix it. To me, that's awesome because a lot of companies would just kind of leave it and say, fuck it, it is what it is. And then lastly, the Kahles DLR 5-25. This kind of sits to me in the similar spot as the Razor 2, where I don't foresee them making a bunch of huge changes to it now because obviously they're going to push people towards the 328. And truthfully, I don't have a ton of complaints with the 5-25. I think my biggest complaint was just price point. Like, the glass is okay for... It's the glass is good. It just isn't good enough to compete in the price point. I don't want to get too far down that because I'm going to rank all these in another part of this video segment, obviously. But that's one of my bigger complaints. But in terms of a feature set and all that kind of stuff, I'd like to see the Skimmer Plus adapted to the 5-25. This 3-28 has the option for the Skimmer Plus, but it's the only Kahles scope currently that has an option for the Skimmer Plus, and even the Skimmer 4 Plus. So I'd like to see maybe that 5-25 get access to some of those. But other than that, feature-wise, mine was set up very similarly to this 3-28. 10 mils per turn turret, obviously, because that's the DLR thing, and left side windage. And yeah, I mean, other than that, I thought that the 5-25 was pretty well done. Not any huge complaints, and it worked great with a trigger cam, which for me is bonus points. So that's kind of it. That's my likes and dislikes, short and sweet for the most part of all of these scopes, and I'm gonna do the next part, and we'll be wrapping this up shortly. And I know everybody wants me to rank them, so just stay tuned. We're going to get there, I promise. I'm not going to leave you hanging, and we're going to put a definitive sort of boom, boom, boom to all of these and kind of go from there. But yeah, short and sweet. Like I said, I'm trying to keep these videos as short as possible. I know this one's a little bit long, but I physically can't get through everything and talk fast enough without, just cutting off a bunch of shit and still keeping it relatively short. So just kind of expediting efficiency through all of this and get you the information that you need. All right. So stay tuned for the next part. I appreciate you guys for watching, and yeah, let's just get right to it. Peace.